This is Marketing Heroes Unfiltered, the journey to CMO, the podcast where we interview high-achieving B2B marketers to know their stories, struggles, and insights in this fast-paced and competitive industry. Hosted by Leslie Carruthers and Danny Muscaplat, let's meet today's hero. Bernie Borges is the Vice President of Global Content Marketing at iQor, an advisory board member at Vengresso, and producer and host of the Midlife Fulfilled podcast. He is also a highly accomplished B2B marketer and technology sales professional who has been in the industry for over 3 decades. He's the author of Marketing 2.0 and has been recognized by peers as one of the top 25 content marketing experts, Marketing Insider's 60 Best Marketing Speakers, and SEMrush's Top 100 Content Marketing Influencers. This is a podcast about heroes, which is why Bernie Borges is here. Thank you so much, Bernie. We're looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you for having me, Leslie and Danny. Good to be here.
First, let's, if you would share, please, how do you start your day?
So I start my day at 5 a.m. The alarm goes off at 5 a.m. Monday through Friday, not on the weekends. And first thing I do is I shave, something, Danny, that you don't do regularly, which is great. That's good for you. But I like to be clean shaven. I actually shave 7 days a week, but I only get up at 5 a.m. 5 days a week. So after I shave, I work out. And that's how I start my day. After a workout, I do a little quiet time, little me time, little prayer time to kind of, connect with God before the day. And then I start my day. I actually make a point of not looking at either email or social media before about 7:30 a.m., which I know for a lot of people is not easy to do, but it's just discipline for me. And that time before I hit email or social media is my time. So I really cherish it.
Love that. It does take a lot of discipline. Everybody reaches for their phone first thing. And what good ever comes of that?
Yeah. I'm using my phone, Danny, but I'm either watching a YouTube video or I might be watching the news. I say watching. I'm working out and I have it on. I'm listening to it, or I might be listening to a podcast because I think that I'm both a podcaster and also a podcast junkie. I listen to a lot of podcasts. So I'm using my phone, but I'm just not checking my email or social media.
Gotcha. Okay. That's an important distinction. Love that. So, because this is a podcast about heroes, we always ask the question, what is your hero origin story? Where did it all begin for you?
Well, I'd say that it really began, Danny, as in college, I thought that I was going to be a product manager, and I had this vision of being a product manager at Procter & Gamble, P&G. And I fell into technology sales, and I loved it, absolutely loved it. And so I stayed in technology sales for about 10 years. Meanwhile, my degree was in marketing, so I studied marketing. And about 10 years into my sales career, I was selling for a software company out in Mountain View, California. And I physically worked in the headquarters office, meaning when I was in the office, that was my office, the headquarters office. Whereas the rest of the sales team were pretty distributed out in the field offices, or even back in those days, and I'm going to go back a few decades, some people work from home. Anyway, long story short, the VP of marketing once called me into his office and said, Bernie, you've got a lot of good ideas. Would you think about maybe coming inside and putting on a marketing hat and taking a marketing role? And I said, well, we got to talk to my boss if we're going to make that happen. So they got together, they created a new position called the Director of Field Marketing, which really today would be kind of like sales enablement. It was a hybrid marketing role. It was a marketing role, but it was directly in support of sales. So it wasn't a product manager role. They had product managers, but it was directly in support of sales. That was really the beginning of my marketing career. And I really just stayed in marketing ever since then, kind of progressed into different roles, eventually leading to a VP of marketing role for an ERP software company. And then eventually having my own agency, which I ran for about 15 years, which was, I think, Leslie, was a B2B focused content marketing agency. But it all started in making that transition from the sales role into that Director of Field Marketing role.
And when did you stop owning your own company? Or do you still?
I did it for 15 years. And then about the last 5 of those years, if I'm totally transparent, and vulnerable with you and the millions of viewers that you have. I kind of reached a point in the last 5 years where the business had just plateaued. I mean, the business was fine. Economically, it was fine, but it wasn't growing. Couldn't figure out how to grow it. And I really wasn't all that keen on just adding a lot more people. So, long story short, I rolled the dice and I got together with some people and we took my business and a few others and kind of came together and did a roll up. So, we did that. And about 4 years into it, I just didn't like, where the state of the business. The business was okay, but it didn't fulfill me and had a friendly parting of the ways. And then I did the unthinkable, Danny and Leslie. I took a job. I accepted a job back in corporate America. Funny because when I started my business in 2001, I said at that time, I'll never, work for a company again, right? But I didn't go applying for a job. It just happened through a relationship
Mhm.
where the position was created for me. Second time in my career. Maybe there's a pattern there, although they were split
Awesome.
apart by a few decades. And so I joined iQor as VP of Global Content Marketing, which was, again, a new position that was created in recognition of the fact that the company really to sort of needed to elevate its content marketing strategy and production to really compete in a very competitive marketplace.
Mhm. There's no shame in being in-house or agency side or all the things. It's good to be able to work in whatever environment is needed, right? And where you can make a difference. And I know you're all about life fulfillment, right? That's what the Midlife Journey podcast is about, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. At the five pillars. Love it. In all those different roles, I'm sure you've seen a lot of different themes, looked at problems from lots of different angles, points of view. Is there anything that you've dealt with recently in the problem bucket, opportunity bucket, that you can share about what you've seen, how you handled it, that would help others in similar positions in B2B digital marketing?
I think there's a little bit of same old along with the new. So the same old is you have to really understand your customer. That's the same old. Because it's the same old, I don't think I need to spend a lot of time on that just to
Mhm.
reinforce that you can't overlook that. Try to you can't allow yourself to be distracted by other trends and shiny objects and that sort of thing. You've got to know your customer. And in marketing, really, there's two customers. There's the customer that ultimately buys from the business, but also in B2B anyway, I really view my first customer as the sales team. They're really the first customer. And if you think back to the story I shared with you, where my first marketing role was director of field marketing supporting the sales team. So I've had that lens, that mindset for decades. So the same old is know your customer, but in B2B, there's two customers. There's the one that buys, and then there's the one that is selling to that customer and
Mhm.
really catering to the sales team. At iQor, we survey them. Well, first of all, we're in contact with them pretty regularly, but we also do a formal survey twice a year. We
Mhm.
do it at midpoint and at the end of the year. And we ask them a bunch of questions to really understand what they're thinking, what their needs are, what's been working for them, not working for them, what trends they're seeing in the marketplace, as well as who they're competing against when they win, what do they win? When they lose, what do they lose? That sort of thing. So really, really know the external customer that buys, and then know your internal customer. And then the other one that I'll mention is just the obvious one, and that's just the evolution of technology, not just AI, because I know that it's easy to just mention AI as a technology that we all have to be embracing, but also revenue enablement, sales enablement, the sales and marketing tech stack that you really have to get your arms around and understand which tools and platforms are really going to be useful and productive and make a difference and contribute to moving the needle versus the ones that would be a nice to have. And I don't think there's any one answer that fits everyone, right? It's specific to an organization. So we've been going through that by making those decisions and prioritizing the ones that we think we need in terms of moving the needle, and then working collaboratively again with the sales team and the executive team to get the budget approval, to get them in house and on board, and then educating the sales team on the role that these technology platforms can play in supporting their selling efforts. So Those are the two that I would call out.
And I love the survey as an action item regularly to actually check in and see how's it going.
Exactly. Exactly. Got to be listening both casually as we do throughout the year and then kind of in a formal way.
I like that a lot. It's also your second point about embracing technology and what can it do for us is a great segue into my next question. You've been doing this for a while, as you've said, which I love that you embrace, by the way. So, aside from technology, what's changed in marketing over the course of your career?
Well, certainly for one, Danny, has been the analytics, the availability of analytics that was not always the case, right?
Yeah.
I think you both know that. So that certainly has been a contributor, although as you can both attest to, analytics has become pretty complex. I remember there was a day where I could go into Google Analytics and spend 30 minutes of useful time in Google Analytics, kind of understanding what's going on. I can't do that anymore. Google Analytics has become complex. So the analytics side. And then, back to the point I mentioned earlier, just the explosion of the tech stack, both on the marketing tech stack and then the sales tech stack. And I can't separate them. I mean, yes, there's a distinction, but I can't omit, maybe that's a better way to say it. I can't omit or exclude the sales tech stack from the universe of what we need to be successful. So really it's the explosion of that whole tech stack. And back to the point I made a moment ago, which is choosing the products, the platforms that are going to be helpful, truly helpful to really support the selling efforts. I remember when I was VP of marketing for a software company in the mid to late 90s. I mean, we were just thinking about the internet and putting up our first website, which I think we did in like 1998. There was not even a semblance of the kind of tech stack offerings that exist today, right? Almost, what's the math on that? Is that 20 or 30 years? I can't do the math that quick in my head. But yeah, so
25.
that's the big difference. The availability of both analytics and then this ocean of technology platforms that we constantly have to be keeping our eye on and deciding what we're going to use and what we're just going to either keep an eye on or even ignore because it just doesn't get on the radar.
Yeah. I want to back up for just a second because you talked about knowing your audience. Do you think that what your customers or prospects want to hear is different than it's been in the past? Do they want a different message or to be spoken to differently?
So, Danny, I'm going to answer your question in a slightly different way. So, I'm not going to ignore your question. I think the
Sure.
short answer is yes. I think customers expect that. However, customers also want more self service
Mm.
and less interaction with sellers. For some people, my next statement is going to be a really obvious statement, and maybe for some not. And that is that, again, B2B customers really want to work with salespeople who are adding value to their buying journey. I think sales process is outdated terminology or the sales cycle. I mean, that terminology is outdated because it's all about the buyer's journey. It's not about the selling process. It's about you can have a sales methodology. I'm not discounting the value of a sales methodology, but the buyer is in control of their own journey and they want a lot of independence. But then when they want to interact with a salesperson, they want that salesperson to add value. One of the things I love about my job is that I wear a buyer's hat. I mean, we recently went through an evaluation of, one of these technology platforms that I'm talking about here and went through, three of the market leading suppliers and went through multiple calls and demos. And then eventually, over the span of a few months and lots of due diligence, selected one. And in all three cases, the sales teams were professional. But what I wanted from each of them, and to their credit, they delivered on this. So I have no criticism of either of the three that we spoke with. They delivered on being useful, adding value to the journey. That's what buyers want is
Mm.
sellers that are adding value to the journey. And when buyers can earn the trust of sellers because the seller is acting as sort of a concierge, that's a concept that I heard a few years ago. I forget who put it on my radar, so I'm not going to take any pride of authorship on it. But when a seller is like a concierge, meaning they're really helpful to the buyer, in that buyer's journey, then that really earns the know, like, and trust, the KLT factor with buyers. and then there's just a better chance of that journey ending up where the seller wants it to end up, but also where the buyer wants it to end up. So really coming together. And I'm not taking anything away from the fact that sellers still need to close deals, but not like years ago where it was an aggressive close and just a lot of, follow up. Not that follow up doesn't exist or shouldn't exist. Yes, it should, but it should be in the context of delivering value for the buyer during their journey.
That's great. Thank you for that.
Sounds like having the two, knowing your internal audience and then your external audience. That sounds like the start of a great book, Bernie. I'd like to see that. Another topic that I know you've dug into recently is artificial intelligence. So you've got a podcast with Mark Schaefer where you look at that. You lent your predictions to the Content Marketing Institute survey for what's on trend for 2024. How are you seeing AI impact your external customer and your internal customer and that customer journey and the sales process?
Sure. I certainly don't claim any expertise on this topic. It's a topic that I try to follow, and I follow it in several ways through content consumption, including podcasts, videos, reading, that sort of thing. But it's a fast moving topic, as you know.
Sure.
So,
Telling everyone what they think about it.
right,
We all
right.
work on it together.
Exactly, exactly. So you mentioned my podcast with Mark Schaefer. He and I discussed the role of AI. That was on my Midlife Fulfilled podcast. So I asked him to talk about the role of AI in midlife careers.
Mhm.
And what we,
Love what you all said that I think you started the whole episode off with that midlifers are likely to be less confronted with AI and
yeah,
to be less impacted. Um,
yeah. And the reason,
yeah.
right, the reason for that, Leslie, is
Mhm.
because there's so much experience that those of us in a midlife season have, right? Because we've got decades of experience, and with experience comes wisdom
Mhm.
that AI in its current form, this can change tomorrow, right? But in its current form, is really good at quickly providing information, but we still need to apply a combination of a filter as well as critical thinking
Mhm.
and strategy. Even though AI can help you with strategy, but it still requires the human to shape that strategy into something that's really going to work, something that makes sense within your business, whether it's a big company like iQor, my employer, or if you're an entrepreneur and you're in a small company environment. So the role of AI is really today is around adding productivity to things that we do, tasks, ideation,
Mhm.
again, helping formulate strategy, that sort of thing. We talked about using AI as sort of a smart intern. This is something when I'm talking to someone who hasn't been using AI much, because I use it pretty much on a daily basis. And I've adopted this mindset, which again, I can't claim pride of our authorship. I just heard this and I thought that's brilliant. And that's treating AI as a smart intern and feeding AI a question and then drilling down with whatever you get back from it, just drill down more and more, kind of like you would with an intern, where you kind of start broad and then just get narrower and narrower through additional prompting. And it can give you a lot of really great information, but it still takes people with critical thinking skills and experience and wisdom to take that and do something meaningful with it. So for now, that's where we are today. I don't know when this episode is going to publish, but who knows, when that's going to change because it is moving fast.
Mhm. Nope, those are great best practices. Important brainstorming, content, strategizing, and yeah, it's an ever growing tech stack.
And that
Super
it's only as
exciting.
good as its user, right? I think that's that sums up too. Like it's only good in the hands of someone who knows how to use it well. Just like you can bring on an intern if you don't give them a great assignment, is it valuable?
Yeah. And
It's
I think
great
another way
content.
that I would say it is I think generative AI is likely to always need the human interaction. And again, what I said earlier, the wisdom, the experience applied to really leverage it, to harness, to put it into motion, generative AI. However, when, and I don't say if, but when artificial general intelligence, what's known as AGI, not only becomes available, but becomes mainstream, then I say all bets are off. I'm not making any predictions on, what we're going to do with it or not do with it, because I think we don't know what we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just going to be a game changer, and we'll see what happens and how the dust settles. But I think that's what's going to be the game changer. I think generative AI, we still need the human interaction. AGI, don't know.
Yeah, and when
Don't know.
UGI will be here, that's the other big question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Good
I'm
distinction.
excited even before that point about your, I'm with you on the CMI prediction that you made about large language models, LLMs being available that are specifically, contained ecosystems that you can use inside the company. So you don't have to be as concerned about, putting everything you have in the pool, train it up and have your own GPTs and everything in that can really help you fly. Where I get most excited is thinking about, okay, if we can get more efficient in X, Y, and Z, that frees up time for the thing that you should be doing that's really going to make a difference, but you just can't get to, right? Or rarely get to.
Can we talk about your podcast, Bernie? We've mentioned it a couple times, but the listeners don't know what it is. Leslie and I do. Just tell us how it came to be, a little bit about it, where people can find it.
Sure. Yeah. The Midlife Fulfilled podcast. So I've been podcasting for about 10 years. Across four podcast shows, including my Midlife Fulfilled podcast, which is 2 years old now. When I started it 2 years ago, February 2022, I was in between personal podcasts. I had retired a previous podcast at episode 300, almost a year before that. So I was itching to get out there with another podcast that was truly my podcast. And I knew that I didn't want to do another marketing podcast. I wanted to do something around midlife because of the season of life that I'm in and all the things that I'm experiencing, which I knew I was not alone in experiencing, the stresses and the ups and the downs and so forth. So I did a bunch of research and I discovered that there are a lot of podcasts on midlife. However, the vast majority of the podcasts that I found in my research were hosted by women and they were for women. So they were talking about the midlife challenges that women deal with. And I wanted to do a podcast that was for men and women, not unique to either one. And I selected fulfillment as the theme because I didn't find anybody talking about it. I found people talking about happiness, and I did some research and I sort of validated what I was thinking, which is there is a similarity, but also a distinction between happiness and fulfillment. And the short version of that, because I can talk about this for a long time, but the short version of that is that happiness is an emotion and it can be short lived or long lived. You can be happy for a minute or a few minutes or a few hours, like your sports team won a big game and you're super happy. And then something else in life happens in the moment and you're unhappy for whatever the reason may be. Fulfillment is a different emotion. It's more soul deep. It's really deep in your soul. And the operative characteristic of fulfillment is that it is immutable. It is immutable. It is permanent. So I break up midlife into 5 pillars. You alluded to that earlier, Leslie, and then you can look at your fulfillment across these 5 pillars. So the 5 pillars are health, fitness, career, relationships, and legacy. So instead of asking yourself, well, how fulfilled am I in my life? Ask yourself that question across the 5 pillars. Again, health, fitness, career, relationships, and legacy. And the idea basically is that whatever level of fulfillment you have, it's immutable. So let's say in your career, you reached a certain pinnacle in your career. You achieved either a position or some acknowledgement or a certification, whatever it may be. Once you've achieved that, that's immutable. Nobody can take that away from you. I mean, even think back to just graduating college or getting a graduate degree or getting, again, as I mentioned, a certification. If that's an achievement, that's immutable. The fact that both my kids graduated college debt free, right? Now they of course went through college, but as parents, my wife and I can feel the fulfillment of we got our kids through college debt free, you know? So
Yeah.
that is immutable. So the idea of seeking fulfillment and understanding the difference between fulfillment and happiness, because again, happiness can be fleeting, could be up and down, up and up and up and down, even within a day, whereas fulfillment is a little more long term. And then looking at it across those five pillars. Again, health, fitness, career, relationships, and legacy. That really covers everything. And then just ask yourself, how fulfilled are you in each of those pillars? And that's essentially what my Midlife Fulfill podcast is about.
I love it so much. Is every pillar binary? You're either fulfilled or not, or are there levels and tiers and you
No,
are
no,
always
no, no.
striving
Yeah.
for more?
First of all, Danny, that is a very personal question. So I say no, but then I immediately caught myself and thought, well, everybody should answer that question however they want to answer that question. For me, I answer that question in terms of how fulfilled am I in each of those pillars? Am I 10% fulfilled or 90% fulfilled or 50 or 60 or, whatever? And that's not a scientific, calculation, right?
Sure.
That's just an estimate. How fulfilled am I in each of those pillars? And when we do that, then we can really understand where we might want to be focused on, right? So here's a simple example. It's a little dark, but it kind of paints a picture. Say you're really super fulfilled in your career. You've achieved great things in your career, certifications. What comes to mind is a college professor who achieves tenure. If you know what's involved for a college professor to achieve tenure, it's a big deal. So imagine the fulfillment that a college professor has when they achieve tenure. As an example, I think it's a good example because that's a really humongous achievement, right? But let's say a college professor who's achieved tenure has a broken relationship at home and they're miserable in that relationship. Again, it's a little dark, but you see the contrast,
Yeah.
right? Well, their relationship pillar, they're not doing well there. Their career pillar, they feel really good about, really fulfilled there, right? So it's a matter of where are you more or less fulfilled so that you know kind of where to go spend your time and energy on seeking fulfillment in that pillar.
That's great. Bernie, which pillar does spirituality live in?
Relationship. Because, depending on how an individual approaches spirituality. So for me, I'm a Christian, so that's a relationship with God, with Jesus, right? Other
Sure.
people might consider it a relationship with the universe, if that's their perspective. But it's relationship.
Thank you for talking about your podcast. We really enjoyed speaking to you about it last time, and this is just, I don't know, it's an inspiring topic.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. I want to flip the script a little bit and ask you what keeps you up at night. What prevents you from sleeping?
You know, there's a lot of geopolitical events happening in the world. And again, I don't mean to be dark, but things can get worse. Things can escalate, and so I don't literally lose sleep over it. But I understand your question, Danny. It does concern me on the potential escalation of some of the conflicts that we're seeing around the world, and and kind of dragging us into a bigger conflict, and seeing even more loss of life than we're already seeing in these conflicts. So that concerns me.
Yeah.
It's fair.
So you've been in-house, you've been a business owner, you've been client side, right? And how, yeah, looked at it out in the field, a salesperson. Can you share a little bit about how you manage up, down, sideways for folks who may be struggling with that issue or just looking to take things to the next level?
So for me, Leslie, it's really all about relationships. Something that I learned early in my career, which was a valuable lesson. And that is that communication is the hardest thing we do in life. Notice I didn't say at work, I said in life.
Yeah.
Now we spend on average 2/3 of our waking hours working. So if we're going to be a good communicator in general, then clearly that can have some benefits in our careers.
Mhm.
So with respect to your question, Leslie, it's all about communicating and being a good listener. That's a part of communication, being a good listener, and then providing response and feedback and guidance in teams that I've managed over the years. Dating back to even before I had my own business, and I was in marketing leadership roles, and I had people I always tried to be a good listener. I always tried to be a good communicator. Operative words tried. I was always cognizant of the importance of good communication. I'm not going to say that I've always been perfect at it. In fact, I know I haven't been perfect at it. I mean, that I can say 100% with 100% certainty, I haven't been perfect at it, but I try. I'm aware of the importance of communication, and I'm aware of the importance of listening, and I'm aware of showing empathy. And I'm also aware of, and maybe this falls into the empathy part of treating people as people and not as what the title is of their job. And what that looks like is in simple terms, just showing people that you have an interest in them as a human being above and beyond just the job that they're doing and engaging in some conversation. Now, we're busy and we have limited time, so I'm not suggesting that we take hour-long tangential conversations, but it can be done. It is doable to just show people that you care, show some interest in them. Maybe, how was your weekend? What are your out, do you have any outside interests you're willing to talk about? Some people don't want to talk about them, and I totally respect that. But showing that empathy and focusing on good communication has really been sort of my approach. And it really doesn't matter whether I'm having a communication experience with someone that's senior to me, lateral to me, below me on the org chart, or reporting to me or not reporting to me. That's a fundamental value for me, is just good human communication that shows empathy and care.
Yeah.
Love it.
Fantastic. Works at any level in any direction.
Bernie, generally speaking, what advice do you have for the next generation of marketers?
Danny, that's a really interesting question, because I think marketing is really undergoing sort of revolution slash evolution. And part of it is that something that I pay attention to that's sort of connected to what I'm doing with the Midlife Fulfill podcast. And that is the fact that we have as many as 5 generations in the workforce right now. Now, I'm speaking in terms of like the aggregate workforce. That may not be the case in a particular company. Like, there are a lot of companies that have a lot of age discrimination and have a very youthful workforce. So the point I'm making in the context of your question, Danny, is I think that we really need a good blend of experience, from youthful insight, maybe a little more tech savvy. I know I'm being a little stereotypical, to the insights, the experience, the people that are over 40, over 50, that again have the insights and experience that someone in their mid-20s doesn't have. And I think that combination of the two. So we've got to continue to embrace tools and technology in marketing. I mentioned the importance of analytics and the whole tech stack. So we have to continue to embrace that for sure. It can add to our productivity. It can add to the results that we're getting, but we still also need, again, the strategy and the wisdom and the insights of just business in general, as well as what I was referring to or speaking of a moment ago, and that is just good communication that may or may not be in place with someone perhaps in their 20s. And I don't mean to stereotype, but someone who's got a great skill on something, but it may not include communication, particularly since a lot of the younger marketers are coming up in the age of everything is digital, everything is online, everything is on their phones. And there isn't a whole lot of face-to-face communication. And certainly there isn't a whole lot of in-person communication. Like, once upon a time, we all used to go to an office, either sit in cubicles or offices and go to the cafeteria for lunch, or walk outside and go grab a sandwich with a group of coworkers. Those days are, for the most part, gone. So those communication and relationship building skills, they're still needed. So you've got this hybrid of, we've got to embrace the technology and do good things with technology to help us do our jobs more faster, more productively. But we also need to be able to engage with each other and really get the most out of each other's respective skill sets. I don't know. You think that's pie in the sky? What do you think?
I think it's brilliant. And here's why I say that. Every time Leslie and I ask this question, the answer is very similar. Learn technology, speak up, ask for a position that you want, be the go-getter. And those are all great answers. You're the first person to say, I don't want to just talk about the next generation. I want to talk about the entire pool of people working on the project because of the wisdom of experience. So don't just think about the 20-somethings. Think about everybody. And you're the only person who said that to us. It's really important. So thank you.
Well, obviously, I'm of the generation, right? Of the over 40. Look, I'm over 60, and I've said openly that I have age pride. When I was in my 50s, just the previous decade, I didn't even want to talk about my age. I didn't want you to ask me my age. I didn't volunteer it, and now I have age pride in my 60s, and I'm doing that because I want to advocate for people in my age demographic. We have a ton to contribute, and so for anyone that is really discriminating against people, I mean, I know someone who was discriminated against at age 37. She was called a dino at age
Oh,
37, believe it or not. Now, specifically, it was in a technology company startup. So maybe that's a little more extreme.
Wow.
Um, but the
It's like
point
a
is,
toxic
age
culture.
discrimination is very real. So I just want to be an advocate for the fact that we have a lot to offer the world.
Yeah.
And I think we're needed. I think we are needed just in the whole ecosystem of business because we do have experience and wisdom and we understand business. We've
Yeah.
succeeded, we've failed, so we have the scars and all of that to really contribute to business and work alongside the 20 somethings. And by the way, enthusiastically, I want to work with people that are 10, 20, 30, 40 years younger than me.
Yeah.
40 years puts them in their 20s.
yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I embrace that
Mhm.
wholeheartedly. All I'm suggesting is they should do the same.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's great.
Totally. You have a lot of burning topics. Is there anyone you want to pick and say something while you've got a bit of a platform here?
On any topic,
Any topic.
I think I would continue to sort of rant on what was just ranting on. And
Mhm.
so maybe just continue that rant because I think it is something that I've seen a lot of. So, for example, I shared with you that I'm in my 60s. If something happens tomorrow and my job is no longer available to me, I am not going to go apply for another job because it'll be a waste of time because I know that I'll be discriminated against unless
Yeah.
I really spruce up my resume to kind of hide my age, which would take some effort. I would only either through a relationship go to another company or more than likely just go back to doing my own thing. And I just think that leaders in business need to really recognize the power of the intergenerational workforce. That's my rant. And I just want to put this humongous exclamation point on it that intergenerational workforces,
Yeah.
it's proven. I mean, I'm not making this up. I'm
Oh, for
not
sure.
hypothesizing. And there's data. Just do a Google search on it. It's at your fingertips. There's
Yep.
data that proves that intergenerational workforces are more productive.
Yep.
So any leader
Lower
in any
turnover.
business that isn't embracing that, they're
Yep.
they're missing out on that opportunity.
If I can add to that and just jump on the Bernie train for a second. I'm 46. I don't know if that makes me younger or older within the schema, but I've had leaders who have a ton of experience that I've been able to learn from. I've had leaders who are younger and I don't have anything to learn from them for the most part. They don't have the wisdom of years. They haven't failed enough or succeeded enough or been through enough or led enough that it's a very plateauish
Point
type.
of
Sorry for my
emphasis
dog.
from the
Yeah,
universe.
That's
he
okay.
agrees. Yeah,
That's okay.
um,
Yeah.
you end up plateauing when everybody's largely the same. We've all seen and done roughly the same things. So how
Mhm.
do we learn from each other? So I just want to continue to exclamation point what you're saying because I've I've been the benefit. I've not been the beneficiary of enough leaders with experience.
Mhm.
Not nearly as many as I wish I would have.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Well, we've got a focus group here. I'm 53. We've got 40s, 50s, and 60s covered.
Oh, there you go.
Mhm. Excellent. All right. Yeah. No, so it's great. Thank you.
Let's do the speed round. All right, Bernie, if your career is a movie, who plays you?
Tom Cruise.
Nice.
Love it.
Like it. Favorite KPI?
Engagement.
First job, worst job.
First job was working in produce in a grocery store. I can tell you all about how to sell zucchini. Worst job, lasted 1 day. I don't know what I was thinking, but I took a job as an accounts payable clerk, and at noon I resigned on the first day.
Good for you.
Nice. What's your favorite productivity hack?
I have to say it's ChatGPT.
Nice.
It really is.
What's the last book you read?
Can do. How to have a can do mindset by Denise Gable. She actually calls herself a can do, the world's first can doologist. It's more than just having a positive attitude. There's a whole she puts a whole methodology around it, and it's very enlightening.
Awesome. Who's the most fascinating contact in your phone?
The most fascinating contact in my phone. I'm going to go with a marketer. If I had more time to think about it, I might come up with someone different, but I think you know Andrew Davis.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's in my phone. Not that I interact with him a ton, but I just think he's a brilliant marketer, a great human being,
Mm-hmm.
funny as all get out.
Mm-hmm.
He has that experience factor. He also has
Yeah.
the empathy factor, good communicate. Like he's just got,
Not afraid to be a
I have a
goofball.
man crush on him. You know what I mean? Like I want to be Andrew Davis one day.
Yeah. I get that.
If you could be famous for one thing, what would it be?
Acting. I actually enjoy
Really?
acting, but I've done a teeny bit of like community theater, like really a little bit, and I loved it. And then I've done some voice acting, which is a different kind of acting.
Mhm.
But yeah, acting.
Casey
That's
Kasem
great.
impersonation, totally in your
Yeah,
future.
well,
For
I've heard that
sure.
many times before, Leslie, but it's no impersonation. It's just my voice.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's so good, so good.
Perfect for
Nice.
podcasting.
Mm-hmm. What's the best compliment you've ever gotten?
That I'm kind, or when
Mm.
someone has said you're kind,
Mhm.
that's a great compliment.
Oh, we never asked this, but we've had it on the list since we started the podcast. We've never asked a single person. What was your worst subject in school?
Anything super technical, I'm more right brain than left brain. I think I took a physics class one time, and it's funny how I don't even know that I remember it because it was so bad, so hard. Like anything like that would be really, really difficult for me.
Describe yourself for us, please, in 5 words, Bernie.
Someone who you'd like to go have coffee with, talk to, and be listened to by him, by Bernie.
Nice. That's
I
good.
love that.
That fits.
It's a great way
Totally.
to end.
Thank you.
Thank you
I enjoyed
again.
it.
We really appreciate it.
Thank you for staying tuned. If you're enjoying these conversations, we would appreciate it if you subscribed and give us a 5-star rating. It helps us increase the podcast's reach. Thank you. See you next week with more inspiring stories. This episode of Marketing Heroes is brought to you by The Search Guru, produced by Circle Audio, and podcast cover by Andra Lazord.